George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Gung Hei Fat Choi, happy Chinese New Year to all our friends in China and around the world. It's the year of the snake, don't you know? And my goodness, there's a lot of snakes around this evening. There's a whole boatload of them about to abandon the sinking ship that is Sky News. Where are they going to find a place in the treasured, hallowed British media for the likes of Beth Rigby? Where is she going to tower with her wisdom next? We might offer a vignette or two to one or two of them. And what about the nest of vipers that were gathered at Auschwitz, along with all the people who were involved in the crime of the Holocaust, but absent the people who actually liberated it? It's all coming up and much, much more this evening on the mother of all talk shows. I promise you, this is a show you will never want to say that you have missed. Stay tuned.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
35 years ago, I left the Romanian capital, Bucharest, with my good friend Bob Wiley, my co-author of this book, of which we are both still very proud. It has stood the test of time and was published in Romanian and sold in very large numbers in Romania, although the conversion rate nowadays is, a lot tighter than it was then. Downfall, the Ceausescus and the Romanian Revolution. Bob Wiley and I arrived when everything was dark. The country was on the floor. The smoke was still rising from some of the buildings that had seen shootouts between arisen people and the Securitate, the security of the late leader Nicolae Ceausescu, who, together with his missus, only minutes after this picture was taken, was gunned down on Christmas Day. Gunned down after a drumhead tribunal, no kind of trial, and summarily executed up against a wall. He was a fascinating character. I had always been interested in him. Even in the pantheon of communist leaders, he was like a peacock. He was a very odd bird indeed. And he practiced the most double-dealing, triple-dealing, quadruple-dealing kind of communism that anyone had ever seen. In the end, it didn't save him from the execution squad. He, for example, traded the hundreds of thousands of Romanian Jews who now live in Israel, some of whose children, grandchildren, are hanging out in the casino just across from my hotel in Bucharest. Now, they come to Romania, though their grandparents left here, gratefully, no doubt, to get out of what had become the hellhole of Ceausescu's Romania for a variety of reasons, not all of them his fault. He traded them, basically, for Western favour, and he got it back. Richard Nixon made a state visit to communist Romania and posed in an open-top car. There was no Elm Street there in downtown Bucharest. Richard Nixon and Nicolae Ceausescu. In fact, Ceausescu and his missus were billeted with the Queen in Buckingham Palace and took an open-top carriage down the Mall. Just like, Bashar al-Assad some years later. The double dealing was, of course, to pretend to be a communist country whilst actually being a cutthroat capitalist on the side. It was a path that China partly borrowed from, and it could have led to success, but at the very nadir of Romania's debt crisis, a debt crisis in debt to Western bankers and Western lenders, he fell. Well, people were cold, they were hungry, and the gigantic People's Palace that he had erected, nowadays regarded as an architectural and cultural jewel in the firmament of European civilization, was then seen as typical of his extravagant grandiosity. In this book, I interview over dinner on the Shabbat the chief rabbi of Romania. Many of you will find it fascinating. It's not easy to get the book now. This is my last dog-eared companion. But if you can read Romanian, it's still plenty available here. So I ended up in Bucharest for the first time in 35 years. And I'm here for Manchester United's final group stage game in the Europa League tomorrow. But when I was on the plane, a Ryanair filled almost entirely with working class, mainly white, men from the greater Manchester area, they started singing a song which I had not expected to hear. Knowing that they were coming to Bucharest, they began to sing "There's Only One Andrew Tate." I'm not making that up. That really happened, as everybody who was on that plane can testify. This fascinated me. I asked one of the people who was singing it what it was about Andrew Tate that made them sing that song. And the response was so fascinating, I arranged to interview both Andrew Tate and his brother Tristan Tate in this show tonight. We'll not be able to cover in the time available every aspect of what they stand for or are believed to stand for, everything that's happened to them and is still happening to them. But here I am, as a result of a song on a plane, coming to watch Manchester United in the compound of the Tate brothers, talking to you and shortly to be talking to them. But there's much else to talk about as well. I talked in the introduction there about the snake, the year of the snake. Myself, I'm glad I wasn't born in the year of the snake. I don't like snakes, but I dare say they do some good. But the snakes at Sky News, who are about to leap off the sinking ship of the once proud Rupert Murdoch flagship of Sky News, are the kind of snakes I really, really dislike. I could go through them, name them one by one. I have had fun with them over the years. I've enjoyed picking them up, turning them upside down, and wiping the floor with them. From Westminster in 2006 to Rochdale in 2024 to Kazan in Russia at the BRICS summit in 2024 towards the end of it. I've enjoyed kicking them around the park. But the vile, pernicious role the outfits like Sky News have played ever since Wapping, through the strikes that they smeared and slandered, where working men and women stood up for their rights, they could always count on Sky News as their enemy. Well, the same forces that caused those strikes, the same forces that threw millions of decent working men and women in Britain, out of work and onto the scrap heap, are about to do the very same to them. I know that schadenfreude is something that we are taught to avoid, taking pleasure in the misfortune of others. We're brought up to avoid it, lest we grow up and end up as Rupert Murdoch journalists or Sky News reporters. But it is difficult for me, as someone on the receiving end of decade after decade after decade of vicious, vile, often slanderous abuse from these hirelings, these lick-spittles of first Rupert Murdoch and then Comcast, that they should now be getting their just deserts. A trip to the Unemployment Bureau. Some of them might land on their feet, though, as Matt Taibbi pointed out, in an epic interview. If you listen to nothing else from me this evening, watch the Tucker Carlson interview with Matt Taibbi, in which they describe the death. Taibbi declares it dead now. The so-called mainstream media is dead, and the imminent closure of Sky News and the hopefully equally imminent closure of CNN, the bargain basement share price and massive staff layoffs at all of the liberal broadcasters in America proves Taibbi right. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, let me turn on Channel 525 or whatever it is to find out from Sky News what's really going on in the world, because they know that's probably the last place they're going to find out what's really going on in the world. Matt Taibbi makes clear the future of broadcasting is here. It's on Joe Rogan. It's on Tucker Carlson. It's on Jimmy Dore. It's on the Grey Zone. And probably in a few weeks, it'll be on whatever platform the Tate brothers decide to launch. Because it's immediate, because you've got more chance of hearing the truth, and because you can flit between one and the other and make your own estimation of the truth, because you'll hear a cacophony of different points of view, and you can make your own judgments on the views freely spoken on those platforms, none of which is true on Sky News, on CNN, or what passes for so-called mainstream media. But the snakes at Auschwitz were even more poisonous. I've been in battle all day. I've even been readers noted. Doesn't happen to me often. When I pointed out that the Soviet Red Army suffered 600,000 dead soldiers liberating Poland alone, just Poland, and another 150,000 dead in the battle for Berlin. 26 million Soviet citizens, 11 million of them, soldiers, gave their life's blood, died in the defeat of Hitler's Germany. All the more reason then why, on the commemoration of the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, the most notorious of all the Nazi death camps in Poland, the one person not invited was any representative of Russia, the successor state to the Soviet Union. The Germans were there. Yeah. The people who murdered millions of people in Auschwitz. The Ukrainians were there. The people who guarded the inmates in Auschwitz. The Poles were there. The people who built the death camps. King Charles was there, for God's sake. But the Soviet Union, through its successor state, Russia, was deliberately not just uninvited. No whisper spoke its name. All the speakers talked about the liberation on that day, but none of the speakers would utter the name of the country whose army gave hundreds of thousands of their soldiers lives in order to liberate it. It is the most grotesque thing. Some of you think it's ancient history, but it isn't to me. I was born just 10 years after the liberation of Auschwitz by the Red Army. I grew up under the cloud of the Second World War, playing in the bomb damage of the Second World War, playing in air raid shelters, mucking around in craters. The Second World War shaped the world until now. And now you realize the truth of the statement made by Marshal Zhukov, the great Soviet general, the liberator of Berlin. He said, "We have liberated Europe from Nazism. They will never forgive us." And that's true, you know. It's true all over again. I've got nearly 1 million people engaged on my simple tweet about the losses suffered by the Red Army in the liberation of Poland. I've got Polish people coming on to me to say, well, the Soviet Union then set up a puppet government. The Soviet Union did this crime or whatever in Poland. Some of them have got a point. But the bigger point is if Poland had not been liberated from Nazism, no Pole would be alive in the world today. None. No Jew would be alive in the world today. None. Because if Hitler had stayed in power, if he had not been defeated overwhelmingly by the Red Army, 88% of all German casualties in the Second World War were inflicted by the Soviet Red Army. 88%. Losing, as I said, 26 million of their own people. If that had not happened, Hitler's extermination camps would have gone on exterminating all the Jews, all the Slavs, all the gays, all the gypsies, all the Jehovah's Witnesses, all the communists, all the socialists, until not one of them was left alive. So whatever beef you've got with the Soviet Union in 1944 or 1974 or Russia in 2024, you cannot be allowed to rewrite history. You cannot be allowed to pretend that what happened didn't happen, or pretend that something else entirely happened. President Trump, maybe a slip of the tongue, said this week that he loved the Russian people. They had helped America win the Second World War. This is monumental foolishness. The United States, for all its great contribution in the Pacific against the Japanese, who attacked them first, of course, for all its gallantry on the beaches of Normandy, it was the Soviet Union that won the war. America helped the Soviet Union win the war, not the other way around. And why am I laboring this? Apart from the fact that it means a lot to me, self-evidently. I'm laboring it because it is a shadow over the world today. The that we've come so close to World War III in the last 24 months, 36 months nearly, is because we have never forgiven them. We don't like Russia being powerful, united, successful. We don't want its economy to boom. We don't like its relationship with China. Which brings me to the biggest piece of good news this week. For a couple of $1 million, a Chinese entrepreneur has come up with an AI which has beaten the pants of the multi-billion investments of American AI, to the extent that the American stock market dropped $1.3 trillion. Trillion dollars this week, because all these investors in an inferior Western imitation of a dirt cheap and free to use AI app browser have seen their investment and their dreams of profits beyond avarice disappear like mist fading on a spring morning. They realize that China has again triumphed. China is better at capitalism than the capitalists themselves. Discuss. It's the mother of all talk shows, and Andrew Tate himself is up right now. Stay tuned.
George, I'm just looking at another dimension in this Gaza war conflict. Could this be a religious conflict in the guise of it's not Islam versus Christianity versus Judaism, but an ideology, a Zionist ideology, in establishing their leader that is supposed to come in the future, and they will then govern and rule?
It's in their ideology, for sure. The Zionists are no more and no less than a nationalist ideology. They are nothing whatsoever to do with religion. Anybody who thinks Netanyahu is religious hasn't looked too closely into his private life. These people are extreme nationalists, exceptionalists. Some Americans believe in American exceptionalism. Zionists believe in Jewish exceptionalism. Nobody, in truth, is exceptional. There's nothing religious about it. It's about land. It's about nationalist supremacy, ethno-religious supremacy on the land of Palestine. And the Europeans colonized Palestine in the same way that the Europeans colonized South Africa. So fitting, the victims of white European colonialism are coming to the aid of other victims of white European colonialism. And they're doing the whole world a signal service.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, here's the poll, as usual. Should Gaza be commemorated on Holocaust Memorial Day? Answer yes or no. You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. If you're following on the YouTube stream, make sure you've subscribed to the channel and that you give the show the thumbs up, and share it, if you will, with all of your friends and contacts. 16,841 people have already voted, and pretty overwhelmingly so far they say yes. If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 08081 965522. And in the rest of the world, It's 0044 203 966 2625. Well, Andrew Tate, social media influencer, it says here. Andrew, welcome to the mother of all talk shows. Very good to see you. Now, we let's summarize where we are on your legal problems.
Sure.
There are now no charges against you, and yet you are not yet free to leave, though I understand that might soon change.
Yeah, correct. The UK Foreign Office and the State Department under Biden decided to get me off the internet. So they instigated the Romanians to come up and drum up with charges, which they've done globally. And they've also done domestically. We know with January 6th, they have no problem using the lawfare system to attack people who they do not like. They decided that the process was the punishment, and it's been a certainly very long process. 3 years in, the first case was destroyed in Romanian court, which is a miracle in and of itself to win anything in a Romanian court. And then they launched a second one just to keep us under some form of arrest measure, even though we've yet to be indicted with that second case. A lot of people at home, unfortunately, still seem to believe that things typed on a computer by a prosecutor are golden. And if you're smart enough to understand that the media is a lie, and smart enough to understand that a lot of history is a lie, you'd be pretty silly to believe that anything typed up on a computer by somebody aiming to destroy your life is the truth by gospel. So we've yet to be convicted of any crime. We're currently not charged with any crime. However, we remain trapped inside of the territory of Romania because it is the process which is the punishment, and the primary objective was to get us off of the internet.
It's a beautiful country. You could be trapped in worse countries, let me assure you.
It's a very beautiful place. Yes, it's a beautiful country. However, I do like to think that the Western powers were salivating at the fact that we were some of the largest thorns in their side. And instead of demonstrating that their own political systems and their own judicial systems are corrupted, like they had to do with January 6th or the attacks on Trump, etc., they got to use a foreign judicial system.
Yeah.
Because they have no problem at all with them looking corrupt. They don't care. So for them, it was actually fantastic that unfortunately we were in Romania and they didn't have to degrade the reputation of their own judicial bodies, and they could simply say, get him. Here we are.
Yeah, well, we've been across this many times before, and Britain has been that foreign power thus degraded. In the case of my friend Julian Assange, for example.
Absolutely. The Americans should stand there and pretend it was nothing to do with them when the whole thing was them from head to toe.
Exactly. And Julian Julian was effectively crucified and hasn't even yet fully recovered from the persecution, from the crucifixion that they attempted. And we don't know if he ever will fully recover. We pray for that outcome. They're very selective, of course, on sex cases, aren't they? I mean, for example, I watch Bill Clinton swanning around at every liberal soiree.
Yep.
When he was the most rapacious sexual predator ever to serve in the White House. He put a Havana cigar in the vagina of his teenage intern and then smoked it.
Yep.
But that hasn't crossed him off the dinner party invitation lists in Georgetown in the way that, for example, Trump, whose predatory years were less long and less predatory than Bill Clinton's.
Well, this is the thing about the subjectiveness. Not only are we talking about subjectiveness in laws, because that is a common theme you'll see in lawfare. A lot of laws are actually very subjective, and it decides if they want to go through the efforts of trying to make it apply to you or not. But when it comes to sexual crimes, they're especially subjective. And of course, every full-grown man has a degree of history. Plus, it damages and tarnishes your name even if you're not convicted of anything. So it's the perfect weapon for them to find a man they don't like, look through his entire sexual history ever, lie by omission. They can speak to 1,000 girls, 999 say you're a great guy. One of them doesn't even have to say you're a bad person. They can say, I don't really remember, or he's not nice to me anymore. They can sit in a 6-hour police interview with the police constantly raining down their neck, trying to convince them to say something that they didn't even want to say in the first place. They can sign a piece of paper, and now your life and reputation are destroyed. And they've only done it because they're trying to find a crime to fit the man, as opposed to trying to fix any kind of crime in the first place. They're not trying to protect anybody. And it's very selective. They sit there and they choose who they're going to do it to and who they're not. The people who were literally on Epstein's island are saying my brother and I are human traffickers because we had girlfriends before. And the whole thing is a setup and it's a joke. And then to substantiate their claim, a prosecutor types up garbage, and then the mainstream media repeats the garbage. And before you know it, everyone's out there just believing the garbage. It's kind of amazing to me after the era of COVID, after they've lied to us about Gaza, Israel, after they've lied to us about World War II, after they lied to us every single day on the television, the second they see somebody who's doing massive damage to their media sphere, to their lies, and they come up with some prosecutor papers and some garbage that people believe it at all. It's absolutely insane. And I hope all the men at home, every single man who's watching this understands that the subjectivity of sexual crimes, the fact that they can go back through your past and find a girl who retrospectively removes consent because she no longer is prepared to defend you. Not because she has anything against you. She's just no longer prepared after not speaking to you for 10 years, after you've moved on and got married and forgotten her. She's not prepared to sit there and defend you for 6 hours. She just wants to get out of the room. If she's not prepared to sit there and put her life and her reputation on the line for you, that's enough for you to get wrecked. And they know this. And that's why they do it purposefully. It's absolute subjectivity. It's lawfare, and it's the perfect weapon. It's the perfect weapon because how do you prove? How do you prove retrospectively that 10 years ago or 20 years ago that Assange didn't rape a girl in Sweden? How do you even defend yourself against these things? It's incredible.
Of course, they're not the only two. I mean, Russell Brand suffered the same kind of thing. But I tell you, I discovered something. I don't know if you know this. May shock you if you don't. I looked back at the BBC's coverage of the case of you and your brother. And you know who the man was? Oh, so holy, oh, so stentorian, condemning you on the BBC? Hugh Edwards.
That's right.
Hugh Edwards, the despicable paedophile who should be rotting in prison but is not inexplicably, was telling people that you were a danger to young people.
It's those with dirty fingers who point. And what's most interesting about that is the BBC have managed to find the time and find the money to print negative things about my brother and I every single day for 3 years without fail, trying to psyop the populations at home that we're somehow dangerous. But when Hugh Edwards, someone who works for them, gets caught and convicted, within 48 hours it's out of the news cycle, which then goes into showing how important the MSM and the media is in all of these things. Because what people talk about and what people remember is simply what the media wants to print over and over and over again. When they're trying to do a wrap-up smear, when they're trying to psyop and damage the reputations of innocent men, they'll print about it every single day. They'll talk about it every single day for years. When one of their own is caught, they'll memory hole it instantly. And this is what the media has always done. I don't think a lot of people at home understand that their primary weapons are lying by omission. This is what they do. They don't have to lie outright all of the time. If they can just tell you some of the truth and ignore 85% of the truth, they can sit there and say, oh, well, we've told you the truth. We haven't lied because, look, we've told you the truth. But by missing out the whole story, missing out all the context, they're effectively lying. And this is what they do all of the time. They will sit there and constantly say my brother and I are accused of heinous things, which we have not done, and ignore the people on the other side of the fence who are convicted of the heinous things, making us seem like the only bad people on the planet. It's truly incredible. And the MSM media are complicit in nearly all, I would argue, basically all of the ills of the world today. You can tie back to the MSM media and their ability to keep people's minds focused on the exact wrong things or believing the exact wrong things as they sleepwalk into destruction.
We'll come back maybe to some of the legal issues, but I'm keener to get on to your philosophy and your new party that you've launched. But before going there, it's, I think, worth spending 2 minutes on why it was exactly you became the thorn in the side of the Biden administration, because this is all a Biden administration gig.
Yes, it's the Biden administration and it's the UK Foreign Office.
And the UK, but that's the same thing.
Of course it is.
The UK Foreign Office is a part of the US government, as we're now discovering. So is the government of Denmark, and soon the government of Canada. But that's another matter. Yeah. The US government of Joe Biden could not stomach your burgeoning reach, popularity, call it whatever you like, audience, numbers, because you were not buying their narratives on what exactly?
Well, it's not only that I wasn't buying their narratives, I'd also argue it was the subsect of the demographic that I had control over. It was primarily young men, primarily military-age males that were watching my content. And my content, one of the slogans of it is to resist the slave mind. It's to ignore the things that they tell you to do and to think for yourself and to face objective reality head on. And I would teach men to get strong and be brave and not be afraid to say what they truly believe. And that everything that is told to them is being told for the benefit of the people who are speaking as opposed to the benefit of the young men themselves. And they had a real problem because it's the young military-age males who die for a country. It's the young military-age males who are the backbone of the labor force. They pay the most taxes. They do the worst jobs. I would argue that young men in the world today have the worst lives. More of them go to jail. They're less educated. They're more depressed. Like, these are the people that you need for society to run truly, who are going to go out there and have to believe in the country they live in, to sacrifice their lives to keep it all functioning. And they're the ones who are getting screwed over the hardest. And I was a voice saying, look, these people don't care about you. They're using you as slaves. As soon as you stand up and stick your neck out or say anything you don't like, you're going to catch a sexual assault case. They want you to pretend that men can get pregnant and believe all this garbage that you know isn't true. They have HR departments of women henpicking you and stopping you from thinking what you want to think and saying what you want to say. And this is what they were genuinely afraid of. I was anti-COVID. I was anti the Ukraine war. I was making it very clear that our politicians are incompetent and they're liars. I was highlighting the corruption inside of government, just highlighting exactly how they waste money endlessly. Every single show I was doing was showing the lies in the MSM and the media and showing how they lie. And that's why they tried to get me off the internet. Initially, they banned me from everything instantly, overnight, at once. I woke up and every single application on my phone didn't log in anymore. And after the ban, within 2 weeks, this criminal case in Romania seemed to pop up. And before you know it, I was in jail because the ban wasn't particularly effective. So I think a lot of people at home have this asinine view of the world where they think that you're going to have a media empire or a media landscape which is going to be counter to the national security interests of a country. It's interesting, if you talk about Russia, or you talk about Saudi Arabia, or you talk about Iran, most people will accept that the news that is being shown is in direct correlation with the state's security objectives. But when we talk about the West, people seem to think that we have these competing forces, like our left arm is going to fight against our right arm. But that's not how things work. If a government decides it wants to achieve X, it's going to try its very best to have its media landscape also support that objective and convince people that objective is good. You can see it all the time. Nobody knew who the Houthis were or talked about them until we had to blow them up. And then now everyone's talking about how bad the Houthis are for 10 minutes. And then we blow them up and then we stop talking about them. It's to convince the population it's okay to waste our money as the old people freeze to death, to fly planes halfway across the world and blow up people no one's ever heard of, no one's ever interacted with, nobody even knows. And this is what they do. So for you to sit and believe that a national security apparatus or a state will decide to achieve X and then allow its own media machine to be counter to those objectives is asinine. Your left arm and your right arm work together. So if they're trying to convince young men that they should sit in a sexless marriage, in a job they hate, paying 50% taxes to a country that doesn't respect them, and be depressed and shut up and just do it anyway, and I'm convincing them there's another way, I'm a problem. I'm a thorn in their side. And what weapons does a country have? It has a legal system. It has laws. So it says, well, this is a problem. Here's his name. They give your name to a prosecutor and they say, get rid of him. And they find something. They go through your tax affairs. They go through your sexual history. They go through all the traffic cameras and find the times you were speeding. You name it. They just get you off the internet. And that's the primary objective.
It hasn't entirely worked, but let's talk about what the reach you had was. You were reaching millions of people. I told the story in the introduction. It's the truth. Men on a plane from Manchester with me last night were singing your name. And they were all working class men. Most of them were of the age that you are describing, but not actually all of them. Yeah. They like you. Why?
Well, now I think the problem they have is they've martyred me to a degree. So now the problem is that I'm very thankful Trump won, and I feel like there's a shift in the consciousness. I feel like we've won the war against the Matrix. But you have 3 lives. First, they ban you, and if that doesn't work, they put you in jail, and if that doesn't work, they kill you. But I've used 2 of my lives, and I feel like that may have been enough to win the culture war and change things, because we live in an informational war, as described previously with why the media pick up certain subjects and talk about certain things and ignore others. But now they've martyred me, right? So a lot of my fans who used to like the things I said now understand that I am prepared to suffer for the things I say. And that makes the things I say even more powerful than before. So the mistake they made, I guess, is they thought my influence would wane, or they thought I would shut up, or they thought I would be afraid. That didn't happen. Bravery is always inspiring, especially to that demographic. So when I came out of jail, I had a lot of messages from very powerful people saying, Andrew, it's time to be quiet and this will all go away. And I did the absolute opposite. And I think that now they've kind of galvanized me as this hero of resistance against the Matrix. You probably know something about that yourself. And before you know it, you get some fans. You know, it's kind of crazy how it works.
Yeah. Now let's delve into what it is you're saying. I'm not actually all that familiar with it, but let me be clear. I have 3 sons and I have 3 daughters.
Wow. Congratulations.
By the grace of God. And I want my sons to grow up to be men.
Yep.
I want my girls to grow up to be, well, one of them already is a mother of 5. So I've got 3 daughters, but 4 granddaughters from my first child. So the rights of boys and the responsibilities of boys and the need for them to grow up right is important to me. But so is, for obvious reasons, the relationship to girls and women.
Of course.
Why is it that people think that you have a problem with women?
Well, they think it's a zero-sum game. They think if you talk about the positives of masculinity, you're instantly attacking femininity. And this is not the case. Unfortunately, masculinity has been under such attack now in the Western world that if a man even acts remotely masculine, he is considered a threat and a danger to the world. If you look at the men who are purported and pushed by the Matrix, they're barely men in any regard. They'll sit there and say, we don't hate men, we like this guy. Well, so that's a girl. That's not a man. And if you act like a man, they find it threatening. Unfortunately, the truth of the world is the world's a very dangerous, scary place. And when you're a good man, yeah, you may come across as intimidating because it's your job to protect and provide. It's your job to be dangerous in the right scenarios. It's not your job to be uncontrolled. But if you call a police officer, you want a toxically masculine man. If you call a firefighter, you want a toxically masculine man. Who's going to go and defend our borders? Toxically masculine men. So as I stick up for masculinity, unfortunately, they do this very clever subversion. And they try and find exceptions that disprove the rule. And they say, but men who are toxically masculine, look at this one guy who did this heinous crime, he raped this woman, whatever. And I say, yeah, that's obviously bad, of course. But 99.9% of men who are standing up for what they believe in, training hard in the gym, being strong, being unafraid, being patriotic, loving their country, loving their society, most of them are not doing those heinous things. They're actually protecting against those type of people. And all of this is just a conflation and this attack to try and get rid of masculinity. The primary protectors of society will always be the masculine men. This is why they killed this is why they killed the boys when they walked in. When the Greeks or the Romans walked in, they killed all the men first. They kept the women and children. They killed the men to avoid an uprising. So now they can't kill us, so they try very hard to neuter us. And if you have any kind of masculine desires in the world, you're seen as bad, and they try and shut them down instantly. They label it as something. They call you, there's something wrong with you. They're trying to tell young men in the world today there's something wrong with them for wanting to get up and work hard and get rich and get important and have a voice that people respect and train hard in the gym and have a fast car and be known. They try to say all of these are bad things, and they're absolutely not. And what they're trying to do is neuter the resistance force, because it's always been the young men who are the rebellion. It's the young men who are the revolution. And this is what they're most afraid of. So as they screw these people over hardest, they have to try their very best to neuter and remove any fighting spirit from them. And isn't that the problem we have in the UK today? Isn't the problem we face in the UK today that our young military-age men have basically no fighting spirit, and the few who stand up for little girls who get stabbed to death end up going to jail for having a social media post? This isn't about race. This isn't about whether you agree with them or not. This is about people who were upset, quite rightly, at a heinous action and decided to stand up and say, this is absolutely insane. For the first time, people in Britain did something, and they all just got instantly locked up. And who's left? Now we're sitting here as they threaten to raise the TV license 25% to people who don't even watch it, and we just sit there and swallow it endlessly. We're in an abusive relationship with our government in the United Kingdom because there's not a single man who can be bothered to get up off of his couch and walk down outside Parliament and say that enough is enough. They can't do this in other countries.
But the problem with the Southport case to which you allude is that the wrong targets were identified and attacked. It was said by right-wing influencers that the mass murderer, this demon,
Yeah.
was A, a Muslim, he wasn't, B, an illegal immigrant who'd arrived on a dinghy, and thus the ire, hatred, was focused on Muslims and illegal immigrants, when in fact the perpetrator, now pled guilty, was neither Muslim nor an illegal immigrant.
I agree with you. So then why did this happen? This happened because of a complete lack of transparency in the media. This happened because of grooming gangs which have gotten away with crimes for so long which weren't being exposed. This happened because the media decided at random to use the picture of an 11-year-old boy for this mass murderer as opposed to using pictures of him as a full-grown man. My brother and I have just been attacked for the last 3 years. Why are they not using pictures of us as children? They're trying to elicit sympathy from the public, trying to convince people that this person is not a bad person and not a mass murderer as he stabs little girls 122 times. The media has done nothing but lie to the population over and over and over again. And then we have this mass outrage, which I agree with you. People believed incorrect things. This wouldn't happen if we had a transparent media. And this wouldn't happen if we had a transparent government. And this wouldn't happen if we had a government that actually cared about the population. When you have a group of people who you only lie to and you only abuse endlessly, eventually there's going to be a violent reaction to that. And that's what Southport was. It's not I really think it's absolutely criminal and insane that after this murder, the first thing they did was drag up some child's picture of the murderer at 11, trying to solicit sympathy for him and putting him all over the news as a child. There was no reason to do that besides a massive psyop on the populace. And the population may not have realized exactly what the psyop was, but innately they were angered by it. They were looking at it going, this doesn't make sense. Why are they showing me a kid's picture? This is garbage. If the media would have stood up and was honest from the beginning, I think we would have avoided a lot of it. I mean, what makes you mad? Being lied to, right? Isn't that the reason we even have shows in the first place? Because they've lied to us for so long. And we're sitting here trying to get the truth out of these people. So I think, yeah, Southport was a violent overreaction because of the suppression of the human spirit under the weight of endless lies. And I think it's about time our government stops lying to us, obfuscating the truth, conflating the truth, trying their very best to psyop us, and expecting us not to come to our own conclusions. And this is the thing about the UK. You know, it's really interesting you talk about free speech. Free speech is probably the only weapon of the common man. This is why they've tried so hard to shut it down. It's all we have. A billionaire can stand up and lie to you because a billionaire has real power. A billionaire can stand on a microphone and say, I'm going to go right, and then get in private and say, let's go left. I'm going to go up, he tells to people, and then he goes behind the doors and says he's going to go down. A billionaire has real power. Our only power as the common man is our unification. We have to get in a group of thousands at the same time. We can't make those kind of power plays by lying. We can only do it by getting in large groups. So how do we do that unless we can tell the truth? Unless we can sit there and say what we think and find other people who think like us and have a free speech, we don't have the ability to ever rally and organize ourselves against our destruction. Which is why, after Southport, they've come down even harder on opinions. Not because they were lies. Yes, some of them were lies. That was perfect for them to use as an excuse. The truth is, they don't want people talking freely in the UK, because if enough people talk freely, enough people get in a group, and enough people are in a group, then their whole charade ends. Because we can't lie like they can. Our only weapon is free speech, and that's why they try and take it away from us.
Let me clarify something. It's one of my jobs in life, has been. I've represented more people of colour than any British Member of Parliament ever. Yeah. I've represented more Muslims than any British Member of Parliament ever in 5 different places. It's my job, one of my jobs, is to defend them from unfair attack, unfair pillory. Let me clarify. Are you a Muslim?
Yes.
Well, that makes some of the things you seemed to be saying very difficult for former supporters of yours and former supporters of mine, because you seemed to be buying into the reckless synonym of Muslim with groomer, when in fact you and I both know that the vast majority, I was raped by a white colonel in the Army Cadet Force in 1963 or 64. Couldn't get less of a Muslim. These kind of things are carried out by all kinds of people.
Absolutely.
Evil people.
Absolutely.
From all walks of life.
Absolutely. But the problem is if our government is seen to be showing favor for one group, if our government is seen to be showing favor for one group when they commit a crime and not others, this is where the problems are going to break down in society. This is how multiculturalism collapses. As a Muslim, it's extremely important for me that I stand up and say that as Muslims, we do not need special treatment under the law. We do not need special favor under the law. We do not need protection under the law. If we have a scenario in which grooming gangs of white people or grooming gangs of Irish people, Turkmenistani people, Taiwanese people, it doesn't matter, are facing the full force of the law, and it seems that so far, there is some degree of bias towards Muslims committing this crime for whatever reason. This is where you're going to have far-right extremism. This is where you're going to have racism. You're handing gunpowder to the enemies of multiculturalism. You're handing them bullets that they can use. And I'm saying that if you want to have a multicultural society, it's extremely important that everybody is treated fairly under the law. That's probably the first and most important premise. You know very well, if you look at Africa and all these countries, the first thing that ends up in these massive genocides and civil wars is one group feeling like they're not treated fairly under the law. So it's disgusting.
The Labour Party covered up examples of grooming in my own town of Rochdale, for example. They did it for electoral reasons.
And this is my point. So Muslims should stand up and say, we don't need this, we don't want this, we don't advocate for this. This is extremely important if you want to be accepted. A lot of Muslims have been mad at me for this point of view. But I've sat there and said, when this happens, if Islamic men commit these heinous crimes and the government covers up for them, and then the far right gets angry, and then instead of Muslims standing up saying this is wrong, they say, oh, you just hate Muslims, you're advocating for and you're perpetuating the problem. I think the only way you make the problem go away is you go up to everybody of any political ideology, of every race, it doesn't matter what it is, and say this is wrong and these people do not deserve protection under the law.
Well, it's worse if a sex abuser is a Muslim because he's pretending to be a believer in God and a follower of the Prophet, just as it's worse if a Catholic priest is a sexual abuser. It's not something to be covered up. It's something to be more energetically
well, in an Islamic country, they face the death penalty in most of them. So this is not the fact that Islam supports these things. But this perpetuation and this conflation comes from the fact that the government covers it up, and then when it's finally exposed, not enough Muslims stand up on side of the far right saying, look, I don't care what religion they are. I don't care what race they are. You cannot cover up crimes subjectively for one group of people and not the others. Instead, Muslims stand up and try and say Islamophobia or whatever. And this causes the divide that the far right want. This is the divide that everybody's been looking for all of this time. You can't give your enemy bullets and then be complaining when they shoot them. So if we want to live in a multicultural society, I think it's extremely important that all Muslims stand up and say what happened was heinous, what happened was wrong, what happened shouldn't ever happen again. And under the law, we do not require or expect special protection. If you're going to start saying to the British government, we want to be treated differently than the native British people, well, now you're going to have a big problem. Maybe not today, but sooner or later. So I think we should all be treated fairly. I don't think there's anything wrong with requesting that or asking for that.
No, of course. Now, look, let's move on to bruv. For American viewers and others around the world, bruv is a kind of Cockney abbreviation of brother. I ain't no liberal, bruv, is something you've heard me say because it's true. But bruv, B-R-U-V, it's a bit of a genius name you've come up with.
Britain restoring underlying values. Thank you.
So, are you serious about it?
Deadly serious. Absolutely serious. I think that the UK needs a new lease of life in politics that's going to galvanize and motivate the youth to go and vote. I don't know the exact statistics, but it seems that the young people in the UK have basically zero interest in politics when it comes to voting. Yep. None at all. And I see some of these constituencies are being won with 30,000, 40,000 seats. It's not even that many, really. It's truly incredible that we have the youth of the country, which are suffering greatest at the hands of these insane policies which are being pushed by the current government, and they have no interest in political solution whatsoever. So what we're going to have for a long time is apathy before explosion. Once people don't believe in the political solution, what's the other solution? Let's all be realists. The solution is violence. So once all the young people in the world or the young people of the UK have lost all interest in politics, they're getting screwed over left and right. They don't believe there's a political solution. They continue to be screwed over left and right. Eventually, it's going to erupt into something like we just described at Southport. So I think it's extremely important we offer a political solution. And young people are not as politically correct, perhaps, as the older generations. They want answers.
That's an interesting observation and true.
No, it's true. They want answers.
True with my own children.
Yeah, they want answers. They want solutions. They all have TikTok brain. They scroll all day, every day. Most teenagers can't even focus for 2 seconds on a video before losing track or losing interest. They want instant solutions. They want answers. They don't want garbage. They don't want political correctness. They want to see things change. And I think I'm the kind of guy who can exactly get that done. On top of that, I'm not afraid of being the bad guy. And I think this is one of the things that you probably know a lot about as well. In the current UK media landscape, everybody's so afraid of the BBC or so afraid of the media or so afraid to have any kind of controversial opinion because they're going to be instantly pinned down with it. I think if you want to get things done, unfortunately, there's no light without dark. And some things are going to have a negative connotation in the short term. And you're just going to have to stand up and do the right thing, irregardless of what the media say about you, if you truly want to fix the nation. And I'm not afraid to be the bad guy. I've been the bad guy my whole life. So I really believe things can get fixed. And I think people who would be a fan of mine understand that. So for those reasons...
What are the underlying values, though? I mean, let's talk about me, you, the average Joe, Joanne, watching this. My values are very different to many of my compatriots. I mean, from the banal, I don't drink alcohol. I've never drunk alcohol in my life. I don't take drugs. I've never even seen a drug. I don't gamble. I'm a big believer in family. I have a wife. I have 6 children. My eldest child is a mother of 5. We have very different values to the man, woman along the street or in the next town.
Yep.
What are the British underlying values?
Well, it's interesting because I can describe them, but before I do, I think all the British people at home will know what I mean when I say that. Not too long ago, England felt like England. 20 years or so ago, 1999, 2000, 2001, it felt like England. It was still a multicultural society, but it felt like Great Britain. And I feel like the things that are missing are cultural and they're tangible. And it's at a very base level where now when you walk around British cities or you walk around the UK, it just doesn't feel like Britain anymore. And I don't think it's primarily because of immigration, although that's probably a large part of it. I think it's the lack of interaction between people. I think it's the lack of celebration for British culture. I think it's the absolute demonization of British history. I think there's a whole bunch of things which have all concluded in people seeing Britain as just a place they can make money and send money outside the country and perhaps retire in Spain and leave. It's no longer a home. It feels like it's something that people are exploiting and using and raping just for the financial benefit. And for a country to survive, there has to be a strong culture because culture is always going to be a more powerful driving force than police. And culture is always going to be a more powerful driving force than courts or prison. I think the reason a lot of the crime and a lot of the problems we have going on in the UK today is because nobody likes each other. I just think people don't like each other anymore. And I think we need to find a way to unify people once again.
I agree with that, yeah.
But it's really as simple
as... I was thinking today, I used to dig so much about Britain. I still dig the football, for example. Yeah. We've got the best football anywhere in the world. But I used to dig the music. I used to dig the fashion. I used to dig our cars. Yeah. Our Land Rovers, our Minis, our Jaguars, our... But
all of those things have been under attack. Well, don't you see how all of those things have gone off the cliff?
They're all gone. That's the problem. Now, I think you're onto something when you say that Britain's just kind of like a platform that people come to and would like to leave, will make what they can while they're there. But the sense of national unity, sense of national pride in the things that I've just described there, has gone.
It's completely gone. And that's the globalist wet dream, right? For them to come along and find a nation which is prosperous and just treat it like a place for which people can extract resource from and then disappear again. But unfortunately, for the people who live there, it's their home. And they've lived there their whole lives and they want their children to grow up there. And they want it to feel the way it felt for them when they were children. And perhaps the first thing you can do when you unify anything is to unify it under a leadership. Right now, we look at all of our political classes, what they are, corrupt clowns who have no interest in actually fixing any issues. The conservatives want to stand up now and complain about grooming gangs, complain about immigration after 14 years of doing absolutely nothing. So they're clowns. Labor are clearly clowns. The whole thing's a mess. So how can you even unify a country without a leader which can be unified behind? The only way you can then unify a country is with hatred for that leader. which isn't perhaps.
Well, that's exactly what's happened.
Well, that's what's happening now.
Starmer.
Everybody hates him.
He is actually the most hated Prime Minister in all of British history, and I've lived through some pretty unpopular ones. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll continue our discussion with Andrew Tate, but also with his brother, Tristan. Stay tuned. On the line is a Rose in Texas. Sounds like the beginning of a song. On Californication, which is a song. Rose, welcome to the show.
Fan of the show, transgender fan of the show, and I wanted to briefly address your monologue from last week on Californication, because I almost entirely agree with what you said. Trans women athletes taking medals and records, directing children at nightclubs, and even going to elementary schools themselves, not to mention hormone blockers for children as well. The attack on freedom of speech, not only against conservatives, but anyone who doesn't fall in line with the agenda, rainbow flags on NATO military aircraft, which is certainly doing more to cultivate anti-queer sentiment around the world than there already is. All of that makes me sick. So because I don't believe in incest, bestiality, necrophilia, and pedophilia, I'm basically culturally right-wing by today's standards, even though less than 5 years ago, I'd still be left-wing. So in regards to you and everyone else watching who thinks of me and people like me as the villains right now, you should know that I support the most traditional Muslim, Jewish, Abrahamic believers to be as homophobic and transphobic as they want, because guess what? That's freedom of religion, which is a value we claim to have in the West. Now, my religion, I suppose, is I believe I'm a woman, but guess what? Not everyone has to convert to my religion. Otherwise, we basically have a theocracy, only this theocracy is for the ever-evolving LGBTQIA supercalifragilisticexpialidocious club. So that's all I wanted to get out my system. Thank you.
Well, Rose, if I could put your call in a glass bottle and ship it around the world, I promise you that I would do so. Crystal clear, beautifully expressed, and I wish you every happiness in life. It is exactly what people who are transgender should be saying. And if they were, they would disappoint the liberal zealots who want to use them as a battering ram against the traditional family values of the rest of us. Beautifully expressed, Rose. I'll never forget it.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
You're watching the mother of all talk shows, coming to you live from Bucharest, where I'm interviewing Andrew Tate, and later also his brother. But look at the poll, first of all. Should Gaza be commemorated on Holocaust Memorial Day? Well, overwhelmingly, the audience thinks yes. Now, you can leave a comment on YouTube by scanning the QR code. Keep it clean, and we'll read it out. DW says Andrew Tate helped shake the Romanian establishment to its rotten, undemocratic core. I'll not ask him to endorse or otherwise that. His situation is such. Nikki A says, I'm not saying Andrew Tate is a saint or to be admired, but Tate does raise interesting questions about who is controlling the matrix. He offends the real power behind things.
Can I make a quick comment about that?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because the primary objective of the Matrix, I want everybody at home to understand that we are living in an information war. It's always been an information war. The reason they send tanks in to control an area is because they failed the information war. First they try propaganda, then they'll try the news, they'll drop leaflets, and if that doesn't work, they'll send in tanks to kill everybody who disagrees with them, so that the people inside of that geographical area are forced to agree with those with the tanks, to control the minds of those people, decide what currency they use, decide what news they listen to, and decide what information they absorb. This is an information war, which is why they hate your talk show, and that's why they hate me. Because we stand up and talk against the Matrix, which its primary objective is to just purport a lie. It's an empire of lies. Everything has always been a lie. And any kind of truth teller has to be shut down because we are their enemy, much more an enemy than a hawk combatant with an AK-47. We make people think for themselves. And the primary objective of the Matrix, and that's why I call it the Matrix, is to keep you asleep so that you continue to pay your taxes and waste your human years until you eventually die. And they keep you asleep with a false version of reality. It's really interesting. We talked about earlier, about the Bruv Party and trying to make people British again and uniting the UK. I think a lot of people in England have forgotten almost that their politicians' job is to make them richer. And they're not doing it. The politician's job is to make them safer. They're not doing it. The politician's job is to make their country respected on the world stage. They're not doing it. Isn't it a shame that the average British person is now jealous of an American because they get to see Trump be revered, and by extension, America gets to be revered? You can dislike him for his politics all you want. When Trump talks, people listen. Nobody listens to Keir. Nobody cares what he says. And by extension, the whole country's a joke. So if you want to unify the country, the first thing we should do is unify it behind this ideal that politicians should be working for the people, as opposed to the other way around, and that politicians should be able to elicit enough respect on the international stage that the country is respected by extension. And that's all we need, right, to bring Britain back to what it should be. We were the greatest country in the world. And now we're sitting here being lied to endlessly, suppressed under endless taxation. Our roads are falling apart. Our country's falling apart. Our borders wide open. Everyone hates us. Everyone mocks us. Nobody likes us. And if you talk about it on Facebook, you go to jail. It's a clown world.
We are Millwall. Alex Nosal says, I like this Tate guy. He's a victim of lawfare. He seems to be doing well despite this attack by the deep state. And Sam Seed says, what does his party BRUV mean? Is it an acronym?
Yes, Britain restoring underlying values. And I want to bring back the British value of, there are so many patriotic British values to bring back, but I'm half American, half English. And I left America when I was 10 and I moved to the UK, and I spent my teenage years in England. And I remember one of the first things I heard inside of a British school was, come on then. I remember thinking, what does that mean? What do you mean, come on then? But there was the British attitude of, come on, you want to try that with me? Come on. We've lost it. I don't know where it's gone. The only thing that seems to rally up the British patriots are football games, and they'll fight each other over a silly game. Where's our respect for our nation? Where's our respect for our homeland and our towns and our cities? Where's our respect for our culture and our language and all of our fantastic achievements? All of it's just gone down the drain somewhere. I don't know where it's gone, and it's truly saddening. Britain had a very diverse history. I'm not saying everything they've ever done has been perfect. I'm not saying they're saints. I'm saying that you could say the same thing about every single country on the planet. History is littered with good and bad deeds. This is how it goes. But you need to have something to latch onto. And if you were to go around the UK in nearly any town and try and find even 10 people who respect the flag, you'd fail. And I think it's just right.
Now, your father was African American.
Correct.
I discovered, to my surprise, I should say, that he was the greatest black chess player in the world.
Yes.
He was a grand master of chess. Not a lot of people know that your dad was a chess grandmaster.
Yeah, he was incredibly talented. And it's amazing. His tweets are still available to watch for anybody who wants to go through it. Tate Terrific. He died 10 years ago, but you can see his tweets. And it's very interesting. Way back in 2010, 2011, him calling about how Ukraine and Russia are going to go to war, how they're going to take away all of our free speech and try and psyop into going along with these wars. He saw things like a chess master should long before. So it's an interesting read.
Tate Terrific.
Tate Terrific.
I'll definitely be looking at that. Now, our new MOATS website is live, you may recall. You'll be able to watch the show live, which may, in time, come to be the only place that you can watch it live. You can see all the clips and the monologues, and you'll be able to donate to the show. We depend on your donations. You can donate in any currency you like, even £1 or $1, whatever you can afford. Check out moats.tv now. Now, going back, Andrew, to BRUV. I mean, I want to see as many new political forces with hammers in their hands destroying the uni party, the two cheeks of the same backside that have bedeviled British politics for as long as I can remember, and I've got a long memory.
Yep.
These two parties that stand for exactly the same things, who are war parties, who are exploitation parties, whose purpose in life is not to make the citizen richer, not to make the citizen safer, not to make the citizen more proud of their country, but their own self-enrichment, particularly since the Tony Blair days.
Yep.
This BRUV, if it stands, will make an impact, particularly amongst your audience, which is huge.
Well, this is the most interesting thing about my ambitions, because even the people who don't believe in me will be forced to accept that I will shift the Overton window for conversations. If I want to correct myself, not if. When Bruv is a large force politically, and it already is, I believe, when Bruv is a huge percentile of the voting bloc, the uni-party parties are going to be forced to discuss the things that I am talking about. Even if we shift the Overton window in and of itself, we can save the UK. Even if these uni-party, you know this yourself, you bring up subjects that they just simply try to ignore. You bring up things that they don't want to talk about. They lie by omission all of the time. As soon as you put me on a question time panel, it's going to be a different panel than you've ever seen. They're not going to be able to sit there and lie. They're not going to be able to sit there and say the same garbage clown things they always say. We're going to have real, genuine conversations about the subjects and matters which the people inside of the UK are facing. And for this reason, they're going to be forced to perhaps address them. I also do believe that because of the massive disengagement amongst the youth in British politics, that we actually stand a very easy and very simple path towards victory. I can motivate and mobilize more young under 30-year-olds than probably anyone on the planet. And that alone is enough for me to secure a seat. And I'm prepared to stand up there and tell them the truth about their policies and what they're doing. I find it truly flabbergasting that they get away with the lies they get away with day after day. Isn't it amazing that the Conservatives now stand up and talk about trying to end immigration because there's too much of it and inflation's out of control? Why is no one just telling these people, you've been in power for 14 years and you're liars? And you're right. It's two sides of the same corrupt coin. And everyone seems to enrich themselves and then run off to some big job working for some multinational conglomerate. And they just take the money and run. And they have no accountability whatsoever to the people they're supposed to represent. If you stand up to people and you make a promise to them and you don't even deliver on it or attempt to deliver on it, isn't that fraud? I mean, at what point does this become criminal now?
Keir Starmer said there will be no increases in your council tax. The council taxes just went up to 25%. It was a blatant
lie,
pre-election lie.
It's fraud.
No one can recall him. No one can force him to be accountable for that lie. And that's only, of course, he said he attacked the Tories for cutting making the two-child benefit cap, talked about the poverty amongst our
winter
young
fuel
children,
allowance,
and then kept it. He said the winter fuel allowance would have to be defended and then instantly cut it. Gave the exact sum, by the way, to Zelensky to keep people warm in Ukraine.
Well, this is the true secret, and this is why the British Foreign Office want me in jail. This is the exact secret to it all. They're lying to you. They're fraudsters. It's criminal. And you have to ask yourself, why are they doing this? They're doing this because they don't work for the people. People at home seem to think these politicians are ignorant or stupid, and this is the worst cope of all. I hear people say, oh, we're run by such idiots. If they're such idiots, how come they're the boss and you're paying them taxes? They're not stupid. They're corrupt. They don't work for you. They work for the banks. They work for someone else, and they know exactly what they're doing, and they're doing the job they're supposed to do for the people they actually work for. Who wants Ukraine? BlackRock. Why is Keir agreeing for 100 years to protect and send money and weapons to Ukraine for 100 years? Because BlackRock want him to, so they can get hold of that fertile land. It doesn't benefit the people of the UK at all. No one asked for it. No one wants it. And he's prepared to let your old people freeze to death to get it done. And you're going to sit there and call him dumb as opposed to corrupt and evil? That is asinine. These people are not stupid. They're just corrupted and they're fraudsters. And that's why they want me gone. And they don't want enough people talking about it. That's why they don't want you in Parliament. As soon as I stand up and make that clear to him, what's his answer going to be? Because nobody voted for this Ukraine garbage. Not a single person on the planet in the UK wants this. Not one.
Or in Germany either. And Germany's in an even bigger
they're collapsing.
They're collapsing.
They're collapsing in real time.
Volkswagen are handing over free to the Chinese their Volkswagen plant so that they can run Chinese EVs on Volkswagen plant because Volkswagen can no longer afford to produce their own cars.
It's amazing how quickly Europe is imploding. It's amazing. And one of the things that's also very interesting is this. Trump, as much as I'm a fan of him, I really do believe he means America first. And I don't think he's afraid to put the kosh on top of Europe and squeeze us even more to make sure America wins even more. I believe he truly is America first. It's not going to be like it was before where American prosperity is going to drag Europe with it. Unless Europe gets its game together, unless they all apologize to Trump for how they spoke about him, unless they all get in line, I have a strong feeling things are going to get worse for Europe as opposed to better.
Peter Mandelson has done that just this evening. He was very foolish, he said. He was young. He was only in his late 50s when he introduced Trump. Now, before any of that can happen, you've got to get out of here.
Yeah.
What's your plan?
Well, it's interesting because my primary objective throughout all of this has been to prove my innocence inside of a Romanian court, which of course is the hardest possible difficulty you can play a video game at in this simulation we live, because we all know how Romanian courts work and we know how Romanian prosecutors work. Unfortunately, Romania just overthrew their own election, I think, a month or so ago. So I think we know how the Romanian system kind of works here. I won my first criminal case despite all the odds stacked against me. That's truly how ridiculous it was. They said the mothers of my children were human trafficked because I transported them for sex and paid them with presents. So if you buy your wife a handbag, you're a human trafficker. Absolute clown world. But we beat that first case. We have a second case coming up. But I have a strong feeling now that the vibe and the momentum in the universe has shifted. And I don't think people are as susceptible to the garbage that they're trying to purport anymore. And as long as people don't believe it, they struggle. It's very easy to see the elites and see the people who keep us under control as these all-powerful super beings. But truthfully, they rely on our compliance and they rely on our belief in their garbage. And as soon as enough people don't believe in it, you'd be amazed how quickly things fall apart. When everybody at home knows that my brother and I are politically persecuted, we now become poison toads that become very hard to swallow because you destroy all faith in your own judicial systems. And democratic countries need faith in systems. As soon as people don't believe that a court is fair, it becomes civil war. As soon as you don't believe you can go to court and get a fair result, then it's just free-for-alls and machetes. You can see it all across the third world. So for them to then swallow the poison frogs of trying to lock people up, to destroy the reputation of their own judicial system when nobody at all believes it, becomes harder. And they've just done it with Assange. They're running out of life as it is. Their faith is on a thread. So truthfully, as people, our weapon of resistance is not only free speech, but our weapon of resistance is simply not believing them when they lie to us. That's how we have to stand up and say vocally, I don't believe you anymore. And I think now that the tides are turning, now that the global consciousness is awakening, I think enough people are starting to understand that they don't believe this garbage they tried to shut my brother and I up with. And I have a strong suspicion that that alone is going to be enough for it all to disappear one day. They're just going to say, oops, we made it up. We ruined their lives for 3 years. Oops, okay, go home.
Well, the fact that you're currently without charge, but unable to leave, I mean, if I were an American citizen, I'd be expecting my embassy in Bucharest to get me out of here.
Well, the new ambassador comes shortly because the old ambassador was told to do this to me under Biden. So we have to wait a few more weeks, unfortunately. It's kind of interesting how an American citizen can get locked up and the American government didn't seem to care at all. It's almost as if they were behind it. Also very interesting, when I was in jail, they told me there was an American guy who was in jail before. He stabbed 2 people to death, and within 2 days, he was out of Romanian jail and on a plane to America. Wow. But me, with ancient sexual accusations without evidence, 4 months in jail.
Let's take a call, if you will. Robbie in Liverpool wants to talk to you, about you. I don't know which. Robbie, welcome
Hello.
to the show. What do you want to say, sir?
I have 2 questions, if I can. The first, George, is with all your experience, do you think we are now at a tipping point with people waking up and I'm being tired of our elite class? And the second question to tie in.
Well, let me share that. Yeah, let me share that. Let me share that with Andrew first, and then I'll come back to you. Robbie's asking, do I believe we're at a tipping point? I must say I do. I believe that the emperor has no clothes. Yep. He knows that we know he has no clothes. Yep. That all these social democrat centrists are toppling everywhere. Yep. I don't necessarily like what will happen next in this country or that, but I'm very happy that the people who lied to us into the situation we are in are definitely being toppled. Is that how you see it?
I can tell you the exact tipping point. The tipping point, if you think about this and the timelines, I'm telling you the exact tipping point was the murder of Epstein. And the reason I say that is because before the murder of Epstein, they would lie to us and try and convince us of whatever garbage they needed us to believe to do what they needed to do. And they got so desperate when he was in a prison cell and what he was going to expose, they thought, if we kill him, they're going to know we killed him. And we have no plausible excuse for this. And we can't lie about it, but we have no choice. Let's just do it anyway. And after they did that and realized that people just made memes and forgot it, from there's been a shift in their modus operandi. They no longer lie to us and try and convince us what they're doing is fair. They just do it and they use brute force. They're on their last life now, because their life before this was to lie and make us go along nicely. But now they're on their last life is we're going to do whatever we want, and we're going to make it open and obvious what we're doing, and we're going to use brute force against you if you resist. We're going to send your money to Ukraine. We're going to destroy your country. We're going to leave the borders open. We're not going to care about you. We're going to do whatever we want, and if you complain or resist, you're going to go to jail. And if you think about this in terms of an abusive relationship, you have a man who's abusive over a woman. First, he lies to her. First, he tries to trick her. Then he yells at her. But when he's on his last life, what does he do? He starts slapping her and hitting her around before she eventually leaves. They're on their last life now. And Epstein was the tipping point where they decided to stop lying to us and instead just do whatever they want in the open, obviously, and use brute force to try and shut us up. And they have nothing left after that. That's all they have. This is their last weapon before we finally stop listening to them.
That's a fascinating point. Trump says he's going to open all kinds of files. Do you think, first of all, he will? I mean, it seems to me Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison for involvement in trafficking, but nobody has been accused of being the recipient of the trafficking.
Very interesting that, isn't it? Very interesting that they had this island and all these people were supposed to have went and no one's allowed to talk about who they were and they're not going to get in trouble for it. And this goes again to highlight the absolute hypocrisy of this rules-based order, this democratic nation we're supposed to live in, and these institutions we're supposed to have faith in. It's truly incredible how actually corrupt they are to the core. You're right.
Robbie, back to you. I cut you off. Did you want to make a second point?
Well, I'm glad you both agree we are at a tipping point. So the next question is, I know you two obviously don't agree on everything, but could you see maybe you two working together, maybe even bringing in Farage, because to maybe change the voting system, maybe give us a PR voting system, let's get rid of the uni party?
On that last point, absolutely, yes. Robbie's saying, could we work together and with Farage and others to introduce a fair voting system in the UK? On that, if on nothing else, we can agree.
Absolutely.
Our voting system is corrupt to the core. The uni party needs to keep it that way. Keir Starmer achieved the vote of 18.8% of the British public.
And that's if he didn't cheat, which is another conversation, because I have a strong suspicion it's not even fair.
Well, I can assure you there was cheating.
There you go.
I can assure you of that. But undoubtedly, a party which has 174 parliamentary majority on 33% of the vote is a monstrosity. Farage got 5 MPs for, I think, the best part of 5 million votes.
Yeah.
And Starmer, on 4 million votes more than that, got a majority of 174. This means that the parliament is virtually meaningless, which is why nobody talks about it. Do you know anybody in the new parliament? Have any of them stood out to you? Any of them said anything that has proved memorable to you?
No.
Any of them come up with any solution to any of our problems that struck you as a good idea? No, the answer is clearly no on all of these things. Well, look, it's been great talking to you, Andrew. I'm sure it'll be a widely viewed interview. Some people will like it, some people will not like it. It's our job to speak freely and to enable freedom of speech. That's another thing we agree on. A reform voting system and freedom of speech.
Absolutely. Sir.
And the Ukraine war and the Gaza war. There are actually more than one or two. I'd like to thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, sir.
For coming on.
Thank you, sir.
The mother of all talk shows. I'll be back in just a minute with the other Tate brother, Tristan. Stay tuned.
The airwaves. This savannah is a rigid dichotomy of fact and fiction. As Fisher says, the Twitter sphere where the slightest misjudgment can spell being cancelled. One species rules over the airwaves through its ability to adapt and survive in even the harshest environments. The George Galloway. The top cat in these parts, it is mostly active on Sunday evenings in Britain and mid-afternoon in the United States. It seldom roars during the day. Most notable for its wide variety of headdress, it protects these parts from the mainstream media. You can catch this fine specimen on the mother of all talk shows. Don't pick a fight with it. They've been known to bite back.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
You're watching the mother of all talk shows, an unusual edition, to be sure. In Bucharest, for a start, in the compound of the Tate brothers. And we've just had quite a marathon interview with Andrew Tate, thought-provoking, I'm sure. And now I'm about to introduce you to the younger Tate. He is Tristan Tate, and I'm very, very glad to see you on the show. Full disclosure, although we've never met before, you were kind enough to make a modest donation to my general election campaign.
Indeed. Did you enjoy that backlash? Because you got plenty of backlash for that in the media.
Of course, but, we were grateful for it. It helped by leaflets and so on, and it was necessary. We are not funded by very rich people. We don't have any funders. We rely on the generosity of people like you, so I'm grateful for it.
I'm a long-time admirer, and for me, anybody who can kick an establishment party out of a seat and has a chance is a friend of mine. So
kind of you to say so. I was just talking to your brother about that. Bruv. It's actually quite a clever name.
I came up with that. Did he take credit for mine?
No, he didn't.
Oh, wonderful.
No, he didn't. But he didn't say it was you.
It was me.
But it's actually a very clever name. Because bruv is a very English thing. It's a very young thing. It's a black thing. It touches a lot of bases. So how did you come up with the name?
I was looking for a clever acronym, I guess, and I was just trying to think of words that, applied and resonated with the British youth. No matter what people think of myself and my brother and where we are certainly now in life, we're at a very different station in life, but we are essentially working class council estate men from Luton. That's where we grew up. Andrew was a fishmonger for 5 years. I worked in fast food for years behind various counters. We lived in a homeless shelter at one point when I first moved to England. We come from the bottom of the bottom. We understand the struggles of the common man. And I don't think many politicians, certainly not the ones that are sitting in the seats today, can say the same thing. So I thought, why not come up with a acronym for the party name that resonates with the common man as well as we think we do as well?
That's very interesting. I didn't know just quite how difficult your early life was. Tell us more about that, because your father was the greatest black chess player in the world.
Yes.
That's
indeed.
not a small thing.
No.
You wouldn't expect the son of the world's greatest black chess player to be in a homeless shelter or end up in a fishmonger.
Yeah, I mean, my father's first, I guess, the early years of my life, when I was 1 or 2, he was a successful man. He had a good job working for the United States intelligence services. However, he lost all of that when I was maybe 1 or 2 years old. So all I ever remember was being poor. And he had this quest, I guess. His whole life's mission was to get his security clearance back, get his job back. And it never worked out for him. So at the point where my family could no longer afford medical insurance under the United States system, it was decided that my parents had split up. My mother went back to England. She took us with her. And I mean, she has all sorts of family issues that not worth going into, but there was nowhere for us to stay. So we were housed in a homeless shelter on Studley Road, opposite the fire station in Luton. We lived there for almost 2 years.
Wow.
Interesting.
And you grew up on a council estate.
Yep, Marsh Farm. The worst council estate in Luton, by the way.
Well, you've come a long way, of course, and congratulations to you for that. The question is, what are you offering the people who are still there?
Well, that's the question. If I get into UK politics, I found out very recently, a mutual friend of ours, Hoz, who's in the House right now, I said, you know what, if I become an MP, I'll just use tens of millions of my own money fixing up the city. And he goes, you can't do that. I said, what do you mean I can't do that? Why can't I do that? Why can politicians take and get grants and private speaking gigs and millions of dollars from all sorts of international corporations? But the moment a man has made his own money in interest politics, he can't invest it back into his hometown. I'm better off not being a politician if I wanted to do something like that. In terms of giving back right now, I mean, myself and my brother have run our private foundation Tate Pledge for 6 years. We're not a registered charity because we don't take any donations from anybody, so we don't have to. We literally just spend our own money, whether it be the humanitarian crisis caused by the Ukraine war. I funded all the camps here in Romania that gave food and clothes to everybody coming across. Or any good cause, I guess, we find in the world, we try to right if we can. But what do I have to offer the people of Luton? I would say I have an understanding of how far the town has fallen. I moved there at a very different time. Luton was not a great place, but it's become a hell of a lot worse. It's a long way since the Vauxhall closures and the hat factory closures. It's a long way since, it's been a long time since Luton's ever made anything, produced anything. I understand the desperation. I understand the calls to do things that potentially aren't so good for society. I was lucky enough to find my kickboxing gym. And my trainer, Amir Subasic, a Bosnian Muslim from former Yugoslavia, who took me under his wing and trained us both up in martial arts. And that was, I guess, the first stepping stone to getting out of Luton. But I understand the calls to sell drugs, do illegal things, break into houses. I've been around these people. And the desperation is truly beyond the understanding of any politician who's sitting in Whitehall.
Well, you already sound like you know more about Luton than the members of Parliament for Luton.
I'm sure I do.
I can assure you, even if I could remember who they were. Let's take a call, if you would, Tristan.
Sure.
Al-Zahra is in California on the Bruv Party and the Tate brothers. Go ahead, Al-Zahra.
Hello.
Yeah, hi, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi.
Yeah,
I had a
go ahead, you're on the air.
Mr. Tate. I had it for Andrew Tate.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've been a follower of his for a long time, and actually I am a female myself. And so I've been hearing these controversies about, I guess, women, or that women are better, they do better at staying at home and just like having kids and marrying. And I've actually been agreeing with him on these thoughts. And the thing is, I'm really confused right now because I don't know if I should be going to school and getting education, or should I, like, it's really confusing because he's saying that we're no better but for like homes and kids. So it's really confusing.
Well, I'll pass that question on, but before I do, I'll have to answer for myself. I have, my wife has multiple university degrees. I have none. My wife is a highly skilled professional and artist. I'm not highly skilled except in talking, and I'm certainly no artist. My daughters will be encouraged to go to school and university as long as they can and to achieve anything that they are capable of achieving. But Tristan, what this young lady in California, who's a fan of yours and Andrew's, a follower for a long time, she's wondering if your message is that women should bother getting educated. Your response?
My response actually applies to both men and women. The radical views that I'm purported to have by the mainstream media are absolutely false, by the way. I'm not a Taliban member. I believe women should be educated, should they want to be educated. And to anyone looking to go to university, although I didn't go to university myself, and I say that you can make it without university. My brother also has no university degree. We have no higher education past high school. I say yes, university is absolutely fantastic if you have an end goal in mind. Inflation is a concept that we all understand. The more dollars you print, the less a dollar is worth. And a university degree in the 1970s was not just so much more valuable, it was so much more rare and so much more special to be a university educated person. Whereas every single year in the UK, tens of thousands of graduates with their new pieces of paper printed out are leaving these universities into a buckling economy with nowhere to go. Yes, if you want to be a lawyer, you do need to go to law school. Yes, if you're a doctor, you do have to go to medical school. I employ lawyers myself, believe it or not, and I'm very glad that they have their legal educations. When I preach against university, I preach against frivolous university. I'm going to go to university to study business. Why? I don't know. Why not try to start a company? It costs £100 at Company's House. You can register your own company, think of your own business ideas, and by the time you fail, and you will fail the first time round, no doubt, as I did, you would have learned more about business than the university is going to teach you. Stay away from the hyper-inflated degrees that are pushed on absolutely everybody. Yeah, come to university, learn marketing. Come learn business. I know more about business and marketing than most people who will finish university today. Make sure you have a goal, make sure you're focused, and if that's what you want to do, yes. However, if you, as a woman, think, you know what, I want to get married to a man and have 5 beautiful children, and I want to marry a man with a nice enough job that he can take care of me, don't let anyone tell you that that's wrong either. There is no correct answer, and there is no right or wrong answer. However, if I say to young women, if you wish to be a mother, get married to a man and have a family, they'll call me misogynistic. Which is wild.
You know, my father, God rest his soul, who was an industrial worker, blue-collar worker, he worked so hard, including, you know, overtime, 2 nights and a Sunday if he could get it. He kept a wife and 3 children on one worker's wage. That simply can't be done now. The worker does not earn enough to keep a family without the wife having to go out and work.
I agree. And there are many things that I guess politicians should do to combat that. It's the price of living, the price of housing. Even if you are a surgeon, which is as successful, I guess, as somebody who works for the government can be. If you're an NHS surgeon and you come out of medical school at 28, your idea that you might own your own home paid off before the age of 50 in London is wild. 0% chance. You have 0% chance as one of the most successful and highly skilled people that can be employed by the government to ever own your own home. I feel like the dreams of the working man have been shattered, and it's not necessarily the fact that the wages aren't good enough. It's the cost of living that's gone up so massively. It's also a lack, and I really truly believe this, it's a lack of homekeeping skills. It's a lack of basic skills that people need to run their own lives. I know plenty of people, and I see them on the internet every day, in England, in Luton, in the same circumstances as I was living in, or worse. Mothers who say, I can't afford to feed my children on the money I make. And, you know, they'll have the newest iPhone. They'll smoke 20 packs of cigarettes a day. They don't know how to cook a home-prepared meal. It's a basic lack of financing skills. And why is that? Why do we not learn the basic things we need to live life in schools? I mean, I remember taking a class in school called life skills. And I learned precisely 0 of those. We all have to learn those the hard way. You leave traditional education, which is supposed to prepare you for the world, completely incapable of explaining what interest is, how loans work, how banks work, you know, how money management works, how to balance a basic accounting sheet just for yourself. It's sad that people can no longer afford to live and to raise a family, which is, I guess, spiraling into the declining population argument.
Well, it is, undoubtedly. How do you spend your day?
My day is, well, how did I spend my days, or how do I spend my days now? My days, because my brother is on house arrest and I am not, I have imposed house arrest on myself, so I do not leave my house. Luckily for me, I've been fortunate enough to have a house with a gym in it, with an office in it, with a cigar lounge in it, with waiters and staff. So I wake up every day and I focus on work. I know that when I break out of here, I have a lot of important things to do. I need to make my voice heard. I have a lot of places to be. I have a lot of hands to shake, people to meet, favors to return. So I wake up in the morning. I train for about an hour and a half. I never miss training. And then I work 15, 16, 17 hours. I love to spend time with my children in the meantime, even if I'm sitting there on my laptop at the same time. Teach them things, take a break, read them a book. But there's nothing more important than family. And as a man, it's my job to take care of my family. So I dedicate myself to work.
Superb. It's been marvelous meeting you. And I think the audience, by the feedback we're getting, is well pleased with what they've seen.
Beautiful.
Let me just give you one other comment. No, it just disappeared there. I'll thank you for that, Tristan Tate, because we have another guest coming on now from the United States. It's Jackson Hinkle after this.
You have to remember back in 2002, 2003, there was a wish by George Bush for regime change. That's what was driving him. Nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction, which of course didn't exist in Iraq. So they had to construct some sort of formula, some sort of cover story in order to persuade the British public that intervention in Iraq was right. Now, David Kelly, as an expert in weapons of mass destruction, knew that this was untrue. He knew that there were probably no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
That was a guy that could have brought down the whole system.
I reckon you're chaff. You've been thrown up to divert our probing.
The Foreign Affairs Select Committee, that parliamentarian briefing, I think that was an indignity to him.
We saw it on the news, and my very first thought was shock. Oh my God, you know, this man is in the eye of the media hurricane. He should be protected by that at least.
You've got that on your hands, Prime Minister. Are you going to resign over this?
I don't know the details of how Lord Hutton happened to be selected, but what was certainly the case is that he was the right kind of judge to use from the point of view of Downing Street and the intelligence services as well.
Of the 21 days of hearing, only one half of one day was spent on discussing the forensic aspects. That is disgusting.
We were given the Hutton report the day before it was published, but actually what happened was he went too far.
The events of 2003 were disgraceful ones in this country's history, and it's unfinished business. Those responsible for an illegal war, those responsible for the death of David Kelly, have not been brought to justice. There's been no inquest into David Kelly's death. There needs to be one. We need to make sure that those who behaved in a reprehensible way in 2003 are finally brought to book.
I'm very proud of that film, you know, and not enough people have seen it. Killing Kelly. The best, fastest way to see it is free by supporting me and supporting the show on patreon.com/George Galloway. Pretty proud of that cinema poster also. Let's go to California, where Matthew wants to talk about Tristan. Go ahead, Matthew.
Hi, Tristan. I watch you and your brother daily. You guys are very motivational for someone like me. And I wanted to know, why are politicians and religion still fighting?
Politicians and what?
Religions.
Okay, well, Tristan has left the studio now. I'll convey your question to him. My own view is that most politicians professing religion are fake. They're wearing Jesus on their sleeve, but he's not in their heart, and certainly not in their actions. And the more they thump the Bible, the less likely they are to obey its strictures or have anything to do with the life and work of Jesus of Nazareth. El Mission says Tate respects Gigi. Tate is a young, virile version of Gigi. He's got a bit of the bollocks in him. Well, I'm actually still quite virile, albeit not young. DD in London says the UK would be completely re-energised with someone like Tristan Tate in charge. Interesting that. Elizabeth Saunders says, I like these brothers so far. And Teresa Steele says, interesting moats tonight. This is free speech personified. On the line in Kuwait is Rose. Rose, welcome to the show. What would you like to say?
Hello?
Yes, Rose, welcome. Go ahead.
How are you? Mr. George, I'm happy to hear your voice.
By the grace of God, good. And you, ma'am?
I just would like to take a minute from your show just to thank you and thank people like Andrew and Tristan Tate, because actually this world, there are few men who are doing what few people are doing. Actually, my cousins also are in UK, so I know what's going on, and I'm very grateful that you people are doing your best and to the highest ranks. That's it.
La shukra ala wajib, Rose. A beautiful, beautiful call. The Rose of Kuwait, and I'm very grateful for it. Now, the podcast, we're in the top 50 in Ireland. I don't know why we're not in the top 10 in Ireland, to be honest. Top 50 in Ireland. And in the charts in the Republic of Korea. We're in the charts in France, India, and Israel. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen now. But you can also listen to the weekly podcast via the MOATS.tv website. I really need you to check out our website, please, and give generously. Now, because Jackson Hinkle is not allowed on our YouTube channel, go figure, you need to retune now to Rumble, to Twitter, to Facebook, to watch the rest of this show. You've got 20 seconds to change the channel. So if you're watching on YouTube, it is for now good night. But I hope you'll join me on the alternative platforms, including the website, by the way. It is simply unacceptable that YouTube should try to instruct us on who we can have as guests on our show. This is an abuse of their power as a platform, and we will not comply with it. That's why with Scott Ritter and with Jackson Hinkle, we will never uninvite them, even if it means we have to redirect our audience from YouTube to these alternatives. And with a bit of luck on those alternatives, the one and only Jackson Hinkle is joining